There are many times in life we can be critical and say what is wrong with a movie, a book, music, things like that. However, doing a critical reading isn't always negative. Today, we're going to look at all the different things that you can look for when you read critically, including tone, appeal, appeal to emotion, ethos, pathos, and logos, identifying key points, and a thesis or main topic, identifying literary devices in the case of stories, poems, and novels. When we annotate, that is, highlight the key parts of a reading, we're going to look deeper at these different parts and pieces to analyze, interpret, and evaluate them, and in order to determine how effective they are, and in some cases, how they connect to different contexts. If you've never done a critical reading before, it is of critical importance for all students to know. I recommend you pull up your coziest seat and join us. Welcome. My name is Kevin. I am a teacher of English and a writer. I enjoy sharing all my best study tips with students around the world. It's a great way for us to keep learning and improving our English speaking and writing skills. If you're enjoying this video and you feel it is advantageous to you in your studies or your life, by all means, click on that subscribe button. It is truly appreciated. Right off the hop, you might be asking, what does critical reading mean? We can critique a reading, which might mean we talk about the things we don't like about it. Basically, a critical reading means to break the reading down into all of its smaller pieces so that we can analyze, interpret, and evaluate them. There are lots of different things that we're looking for in a reading in order to determine its effectiveness, such as tone, appeal. Our vocabulary today includes words like analysis, interpret, evaluate, and we're going to learn what those words mean in the context of a critical reading. There are lots of other things to look for if you're doing a critical reading. It really depends on what kind of reading you're doing. Today, we're going to keep things very, very simple, but in other cases, you may be looking for things such as fallacies, bias, credibility of the source or the author, and also context, which could include political, cultural, social, or historical. The first thing that any kind of piece of writing has that we want to try to identify is the tone, that is the attitude or the mood of the writing. It can be lots of different things, and you can see before us we have a few examples. It might be optimistic, positive, negative. It could be didactic, which means it's like educational, and maybe accusatory. So we're blaming or accusing someone of some kind of negative action. And again, you see different examples. Appeal is a very big one. What does it appeal to? Every writing has this source of rhetoric. It goes all the way back to Aristotle's ethos, pathos, and logos. And if you think of any kind of writing, you can break it down. You can break down the appeal of any reading into one of those three categories, or maybe a combination of them. So with ethos, we're appealing to people's characters and values, and that's also often done through the writer's experience by sharing that and getting the reader to relate to their experiences or values. When we deal with pathos, it mainly is emotions. It can be negative emotions to get you to feel sympathy. But I would say, in my mind and from my experience, pathos is when writing touches your heart in any way, positive or negative. Finally, we have logos, which is an appeal to logic and reasoning. Writers that include statistics or graphs are using an appeal to logos. Once we gather the key points of the thesis of the reading, we determine what that's all about. We're looking to analyze things. We're looking for analyzing basically means to look for the patterns that we find throughout the piece. And it might be patterns in tone, of course, the theme or main thesis or idea that the key points connect to. And of course, those examples or quotes that we want to use as evidence. When we're looking at poetry, novels, stories, we're finding literary devices that we can use as evidence and analyze those and look at how they give meaning to the piece of writing. And of course, we have the appeal to emotion in there, that we're also looking to find certain themes and patterns that relate to that as well. It's really important when you're doing your analysis to not necessarily focus on what, because you're not doing a book report, you're not summarizing the plot or what happens, what the writing is about. You're really looking at how and why. So you're connecting the points and patterns of the writing to a theme. And for any of you writing any kind of essay, it doesn't matter whether it's comparative, argumentative, or persuasive. Your structure is always evidence, that is your quote or your key point, and analysis, and talking about how or why this demonstrates the theme or the point from the thesis statement. When we do interpretation, which is digging a little deeper, and it depends on where you are at in your academic journey. High school students don't necessarily have to go too deep into interpretation, but I'm just giving you today all the components of a critical reading. So these are some other things that you may be looking for, including the context, bias, fallacies, and how we can compare and contrast those different elements as well. Finally, when it comes to evaluation, you're basically looking at how effective the argument or the main points of the writing are, as well as the literary devices, if it's, again, a story, poem, or novel. When we look at evaluation, the big question you're asking is, so what? We have all these points, and what do they equal? What is the significance? What are the social effects? Or what is a call to action? What are some future actions that we need to take to make things right? Beautiful. Now that we've covered all the different things we're going to look for in a critical reading, we're going to do a model answer. Today, it is that time of year. We're just on the cusp of summer. Many students are writing final exams. I want to do a simple model example today. And so we're just going to take a few of those elements that we mentioned that you can find in a critical reading, and we're going to follow a grade 12 English final exam question that deals with a standalone text. This is a minimum response. It's a paragraph, and it's a minimum response of 150 words. If you're doing this question in a grade 12 English exam, you have about 25 minutes to get the job done. The question is, discuss the use of irony in the poem Ordinary Life by Barbara Brooker. So we're looking for patterns and points that connect to irony. Just as a refresher, irony, well, it's situations, words, or actions which convey the opposite meaning of our expectations. It evokes or elicits humor, a response of humor or empathy, usually. As you go through the reading, I want you to look for examples of irony that you can take and make a thesis from. That is your opinion statement. Um, we're also going to look for tone, appeal, or any other literary devices. So these are just a few elements that we're looking for in our critical reading today. Here it is before you, Ordinary Life by Barbara Crooker. Take a few moments to read through it and do your annotations. Again, when you're reading through this, you're looking for one, examples of irony, um, other literary devices. You're looking for the tone, and you're looking for the appeal. Does it appeal to emotion? Does it appeal to values or characters? Or does it appeal to logos, logic, and reasoning? When we look at the irony in this particular piece, it's not super obvious. One of the things that we get right away is that it is a day where nothing happened in the life of the housewife. However, once she starts to go over all these little boring, seemingly boring events, we find that she does so with great appreciation and detail. And we're also going to see that basically it's almost like the nothing that happens just means that she doesn't have any of the usual difficulties that she might have with the kids or anything else. So we can see a couple of quotes here that we want to grab right away that I think are important, um, and we'll get into those more. So the one quote comes at the very beginning, where we can see the contrast and we can see the irony, perhaps the opposites in this beginning quote where she says that it's a day where nothing happened, and then the end quotes where she says it's been a day of grace. It's almost like a gift, which is again, it's not like super strong irony. I think it's kind of subtle, and we'll talk more about that as we get into it. I think while having nothing happen may be mundane for most, it's ideal for this housewife because instead of having any kind of hassles, her kids go off to school without a murmur. They don't forget their books. Accordingly, we can see this trend continuing at dinner time, where there's no quarreling, actual conversation, which she finds refreshing. Um, I think the tone in this piece is heartfelt and genuine. It kind of illustrates the simple pleasures of a housewife's quiet day. Um, and we're alluding also, again, to typical problems such as the quarreling that she is not encountering on this particular day. So, this housewife is basically appealing to pathos or emotion by describing these simple moments in detail, and also bringing in simile and personification. We'll get to those literary devices. Um, she's also appealing to ethos by kind of mentioning the common misbehavior that she experiences as a housewife. So she's relating her own experiences. Um, Here we can see some other literary devices that we want to try to bring in if we can. Although in a test scenario, don't bite off more than you can chew. In the test scenario, if you can just bring in the irony, that's okay. You must do that first and foremost. If you have extra time and you notice other things that you can tie in, then do that. But again, if it's a test, do not take on more than you can finish. We do have personification and simile here. The day that unwrapped itself like an unexpected gift. The hard, cold knuckle of the year being winter. And I also think there's a bit of an archetype. It's getting more detailed, but I think it's there. There's kind of the bored housewife archetype who's staying alone and she's just got nothing. Maybe she's just taking care of all the housework and it's boring potentially. We do have a metaphor in there. The moon is a comma, but you may not. Again, we're looking at irony, so we want to be able to connect everything to irony. It's most important. With this format, like I said, it's a paragraph. And what we want to do in the paragraph is we want to introduce the author, the title of the book, and kind of our thesis in one sentence. Whereas an essay, like a 4 or 5 paragraph essay, contains the thesis, your opinion statement at the end of the introduction. In this case, because it's all together, uh, you'll just have it in the first sentence. So if you are taking this on the test, again, the format is basically that you use a few examples and you reference them by just citing the paragraph number in parenthesis, in brackets, beside the quote. And you're going to do your analysis of each quote, of course, evidence, analysis, and a little conclusion. When you're doing an introduction and a thesis together, again, in this case, it's very short. In all cases, you want to have an attention grabber as your first sentence to lead in. And I think we want to choose the topic. I think that effective use of irony can reverse the reader's expectations and bring out or elicit a strong emotional response. So here's our thesis statement, which includes, again, the author's name, the title, and your opinion. Barbara Crooker's ordinary life employs verbal irony through personification, simile, and an appeal to pathos, illustrating or demonstrating how seemingly mundane or boring events create a fresh perspective on the bored housewife archetype. Multiple clause sentences, commas well placed, always creates a strong, detailed thesis statement. Make sure it's clear and understandable. So here we dive right in because it's just kind of a 1-paragraph essay, really. At the beginning of the poem, the housewife summarizes her day as one where nothing happened. Quote, and we should have the give you the proper format here again. So we're going to put the brackets in there, and we put the paragraph number, and then of course put the period after. Make sure you do that. By contrast, she presents subtle irony, leading the reader through her daily routine of taking care of kids, housework, and cooking, with great details conveyed in a tone of genuine appreciation. In addition, now again, we're just looking at, all we're doing is evidence analysis. In addition, when the children went off to school without a murmur, remembering their books, lunches, and gloves, or sat at the table, actual conversation, no bickering or pokes, there's subtle irony that implies how these moments are stress-free compared to usual. And that said, the irony is only fully realized, and which is true. We really only get the full extent of it at the end of the poem, when it is discovered that the housewife's experiences to her are a day of grace in the dead of winter, a hard, cold knuckle of the year, one that wrapped itself like an unexpected gift. Here's our analysis here. Crooker's utilization of personification shapes the winter into a time of pressure. Conversely, on the other hand, her day becomes an offering of peace that reveals itself moment by moment. So as we're going through the whole day, we kind of get the feeling that she's enjoying it, that it is peaceful, even though it's a day where nothing happened. But by the end, we can fully see, she says it, that this is a day of peace. It was like a gift. All these uneventful moments that she has, we really get to understand what they mean to her at the end. Ultimately, it is ironic how the author leads her readers to anticipate boredom, yet slowly deconstructs the mundane housewife archetype into an appreciation of simple splendors. By doing so, uneventful moments are transformed into cherished, valued tranquility or peace. There you have it. This is a very simple, critical reading where we are looking for the literary devices mainly literary devices. We touch upon tone and we touch upon the appeal to emotion as well, mainly emotion. Um, check out the complete answer. For your daily exercise, I would like you to do a very simple critical reading. And at the start, I really would just like you to look for the tone, the appeal, and get those key points. Once you get those key points, I want you to um, evaluate the effectiveness of the piece and say that this works and how you relate to it. All right. If it's something that you think is logical or it's something you feel or you connect to, then you can just determine that. This is with critical reading, we just want to start in a very, very simple way. And then we can be looking and digging deeper with more experience and practice. We have achieved everything on our task list today. That is how you read critically in a very, very simple way. I've given you all of the more complex elements that you can look for, and we're going to do some more detailed and advanced videos on critical reading in the future. If you like what you've seen, click it, like it, share it. All of that goodness is simply wonderful. Leave your comments. I will get back to you ASAP. The weather's nice. You can plant in your garden if you have one. The water is warming up. We're starting to barbecue. It's a beautiful time of year, my favorite season. Um, get outside, enjoy the weather while it lasts because summer goes way too quick. And we'll see each other very soon, I'm sure. Take care.